Decided upon left many sad souls staring out at our vessel upon departure, and I, sorry creature I have become, felt only relieved to be one of those on board. It is difficult to tell the high from low in our company, for no one wishes to broadcast his wealth if he has it, and every count wears a shabby coat. Or at least that is the general rule, as you will hear. I could have wished the entire boat to hell, so foul was my mood. I went below deck, where I found a quiet corner to bury myself. A few other miserable souls occupied my vicinity, but I paid them no attention at first. My thoughts were occupied with the most painful reflections and memories, which I shall not mention here. Presently, I became aware of a little commotion around me. Directly across from me, two young noblewomen and an elder female companion were seated. The first young woman appeared about 20. Her dress was not designed to conceal her condition, as everything announced her to be a woman of wealth and property. Property, what do I say? What noble retains their property in France during these times? Nevertheless, you understand me. Her bearing was haughty, and I pitied her. Her future life will surely be miserable if she cannot be humble, but what happiness is in store for any unfortunate refugee? Beggars from our own land, reliant on the hospitality of a country that it has been our delight to scorn these last 200 years. Forgive me. As I was saying, beside her, and leaning upon her shoulder asleep, was a younger girl, perhaps 15, more simply dressed. The fretful old woman beside the first girl had every appearance of the small-minded simpleton families often select to help illuminate the minds of their daughters. What was surprising was that they seemed to have undertaken this perilous journey with no other guide, servant, or protector. The exchange that caught my attention seemed to have proceeded from the captain's insistence that one of the trunks they had brought with them be unlocked, having attracted attention because of its heaviness. "I must needs know what contraband is brought aboard my ship," he declared, causing the old attendant to comply in fear. Had they been able to rely on anyone who had practical knowledge of these matters, they might have been able to satisfy the captain privately, but as it was, the small trunk was opened publicly, and its contents of gold and jewelry were revealed to anyone who happened to be nearby. The captain was modest enough in what he confiscated, under the pretense of recompensing himself for the additional risk he took allowing them to take French gold from France. Such a claim was preposterous, since it is illegal to transport émigrés at all. Nevertheless, one may not quarrel with the captain on his vessel, but who, I ask you, would send 3 women out on their own with a trunk full of treasure without making any effort to disguise it or protect them? Might they not have concealed some of it about them or distributed it evenly throughout their luggage? Needless to say, it was difficult to ignore their plight, for the sight of the treasure had attracted the desperate and brutish, who no longer feared any civilized institution. What is there, after all, in nobility, government, religion, or even the intellectual class, which can claim an ounce of respect from the average Frenchman, who has spent the last 5 years or more witnessing the ruination of his country at the hands of each? The common man understands strength, and this power will be respected by him while it is wielded. Principles in and of themselves are reserved for those whose lot in life has granted them leisure to contemplate their deeper meanings, for whatever good that may do him. "Well," cried a dirty-looking fellow, addressing everyone and no one, "my needs are not less than the captain's. One hears enough about equality nowadays, and I swear I've not had my share." 2 or 3 instantly echoed his sentiment, emboldening him to go further. He moved towards the ladies, and making a mock bow in their direction, the youngest was still asleep, he said, "Pardon me, ladies, but equality demands it. I shan't take more than I'm due, like the captain." The elder lady seemed as though she would faint, but the younger one, who was evidently the owner of the chest, seemed not less outraged than frightened, wearing an expression of helpless contempt. I intended to keep to myself the entire journey, and disguised in a tattered peddler's cloak, had attracted attention from no one. All the same, I could not witness these friendless women preyed upon by idle opportunists without doing something. As the first man stooped forward to meddle with the latch whose lock had been carelessly restored by the captain, I stood up quickly and drew my sword. "What is your business here, my good fellows? What right have you to these ladies' possessions? The captain, to be sure, can please what he likes aboard his own ship, but he shall not mind if I kill 1 or 2 of you, since you have paid your fare in advance." "If these are your relatives," replied the foremost, "I shall heed you, but otherwise 'twould be better if you would see about your business." "My business is mine to decide, and my protection is mine to accord as I like. I assure you, you shall not live to enjoy what you seek to possess." The sort of scoundrels who would steal from a defenseless woman, are not the sort who relish a contest, and therefore I was able to clear the room of the 3 or 4 fortune-seekers relatively easily. I sent a servant for the captain, and when he arrived, I told him what had occurred, adding, "I am sure you will agree with me that these respectable women must be sheltered from the rabble for the remainder of the voyage." "As you wish," he said, with a shrug, adding, "It is foolish for women to travel unprotected, but these are strange times. It is fortunate for them that they have met you." With that, the 4 of us were left in silence. The old woman soon ventured to express her gratitude in the most exalted language. "We shall forever be indebted to you for your kindness to us. Oh, how Providence has blessed us! How many terrors does one feel when traveling with such innocence! You have preserved Mademoiselle's dowry." Here she was interrupted by the elder girl, who said, "Thank you, monsieur. You have laid us under heavy obligation." Her manner belied her words, however, for it seemed she felt such debts amply discharged by the privilege of speaking to her. I merely nodded and introduced myself as Monsieur Gramont, a name I have used intermittently while traveling. The choice was arbitrary. The only Gramont I had ever known was a lawyer. The older woman identified herself as Gaspard, and the girl who had just spoken was Mademoiselle de la Courtelie, while the younger was Mademoiselle Vallon. I retook my seat, preparing to resume my contemplations. It was at this moment that Mademoiselle Vallon opened her eyes and fixed them upon me with an expression I could never describe. I tried at first to ignore her, under the assumption that she would look away, but she did not. She looked at me as if she could look at me her whole life without lessening her amazement. The smallest gesture or expression on my part caused her to jump, and her hands clung fiercely to her companion's arm till the other complained that she hurt. One rarely meets with a girl of that age whose eyes are not lowered almost as soon as they are raised, and yet here was a young woman who seemed afraid to blink in my presence. After several minutes, I could not prevent myself from inquiring after this strange phenomenon, saying to the elder girl, "Be so good as to tell me, madam, why Mademoiselle Vallon stares at me. Have I offended her in some way?" "No, monsieur," she returned calmly. "She looks at you this way because she has never seen a man." I paused for a long moment, unwilling to understand what she had said. "That is not possible, surely," I exclaimed at last. "Of course it is. She is my cousin, and she has been raised in a convent." "Then there are priests," persisted I. "Her mother donated her fortune on the condition that it was so. I assure you, till now she has never seen a man." "Even if it were possible, she could not have boarded this ship without seeing a coachman, a servant. Nay, I tell you what you say is impossible." "I have no great wish to convince you, monsieur, but the truth is demonstrated easily enough. My cousin grew up in a convent, which she was not permitted to leave except by necessity, whereupon she wore a blindfold. A short time ago, my father felt it would be safer for me to reside there with her, since it was one of the last left unmolested in France. From early times, however, this convent has closely guarded the secret of a long tunnel to the sea. For this reason, I was lodged there whilst my father awaited some political intelligence. Yesterday, he sent an urgent message instructing my cousin and I to find safe passage to England as soon as may be. As soon as a messenger brought word that a ship was preparing to depart, we made our way here. The unusual excitement was more than my cousin's nerves could handle, and nearing the end of the tunnel, she collapsed. She was carried aboard the ship along with our baggage, and only just now she wakes." "Ah," I cried in amazement, "how barbarous! I prefer not to believe such a destructive, unnatural plan could ever have been conceived or carried out." "You sound like a revolutionary, monsieur, more concerned with nature than civilization," she observed disdainfully. "And where have Rousseau and the other lovers of our natural state led our country?" "Dear madam," I replied, "must the French bring this quarrel wherever they go? This system of depriving your cousin of knowledge of the other sex can only have evil consequences. Lack of imagination alone could convince anyone otherwise." "Oh, to be sure, it was well thought out," interjected the old woman. "Her intended, Monsieur Savard, is much older than she, and what better way to reconcile her to her duty than to give her very little to compare her future husband to?" All the while we conversed, the poor girl looked at me with the same expression, and I could do aught but pity her. I can scarce imagine what I might have felt had I arrived at the age of 15 without having seen a woman. What an unnecessary experiment! It would seem to me that of all the victims of the revolution I have known, this poor girl stands only to gain from a circumstance that weakens the control exercised over her by the most perverse relations. The first woman seemed about to respond, but then her eye fell upon the star branded unto my left hand, and she fell silent. A look of uncertainty and distrust newly occupied her face, and she was silent for the rest of the journey.